All right, get ready, everyone, because today we are going to dive deep into something that, might actually make your ears pop, literally. We're talking about blood pressure, and those marathon flights that we all love and sometimes dread?
Oh, yeah.
I'm Samuel Harrison, your host for this adventure.
I'm Olivia Harper, and I'm here to kind of help guide you through the ups and downs of how those long-haul flights can affect your blood pressure.
So have you ever wondered what's really happening inside your body when you're, cruising at 30,000 feet?
Yeah.
You're in the right place. I mean, let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us think about legroom and snacks.
Yeah.
But there's some serious science going on up there that's worth, understanding.
What's really fascinating is when that plane climbs, you're not just getting further from the ground, you're essentially stepping into an environment that mimics being like 6,000 to 8,000 feet up a mountain.
Wait, so are you saying my body's basically doing like a high-altitude workout just by being on a plane?
In a way, yeah, the cabin pressure is lower at those altitudes, which means less oxygen is available for your body, and that's a condition called hypoxia.
Mm-hmm.
And it can actually make your heart work harder to compensate, like when you're pushing yourself up that steep trail. Except this time you're just trying to enjoy a movie.
Okay, that explains that weird, like, lightheaded feeling I sometimes get.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it could be more than just a passing sensation. Does this mean long flights actually raise your blood pressure?
For most people, the increase is temporary and it goes back to normal once they're back on solid ground. But it is something to be mindful of, especially if you're already prone to, blood pressure fluctuation.
Right, because it's not like we're up there doing jumping jacks to get the blood flowing.
Right.
Which reminds me, we have to talk about those long hours we spend stuck in our seats. I always feel like a human pretzel after a long flight.
Uh-huh.
But I'm guessing there are consequences beyond just stiff joints.
You're absolutely right. Prolonged sitting, like what we do on those never-ending flights, can cause blood to pool in your legs. And this increases the risk of something called deep vein thrombosis, or DVT,
Okay.
which is basically a blood clot forming in those deep veins. And that's not something you want to mess with.
Okay, DVT officially sounds like the villain in this in-flight movie we're starring in. How serious are we talking here?
It's not just uncomfortable, it can be dangerous.
Right.
While DVT itself doesn't directly raise your blood pressure, one of the biggest risks is that a clot can break free and travel to the lungs.
Oh, no. Isn't that a pulmonary embolism? I've heard that can be life-threatening.
Exactly. It happens when the clot blocks blood flow to the lungs, and the consequences can be severe. It's a reminder that even though flying is routine for many of us, it does put unique stresses on our bodies.
So it's not just about getting that aisle feed so you can stretch your legs. It's about actively preventing these potential issues. Which brings me to something we're always told to do on flights. Drink water. But how does staying hydrated tie into this whole blood pressure situation?
Here's where it gets interesting. That dry cabin air we all know and love to hate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just bad for your skin, it's a recipe for dehydration.
Okay.
And when you get dehydrated, your blood actually thickens.
Mm-hmm.
This makes your heart work even harder to pump it around your body, which, you guessed it, can lead to a rise in blood pressure.
So basically, long flights are trying to turn our blood into sludge.
Yeah,
We need to fight back with our water bottles.
exactly. Staying hydrated thins the blood, making your heart's job a little easier and helping to regulate that blood pressure. Plus, who doesn't love the excuse to ask for extra water on a flight? It's like a tiny act of rebellion against those tiny cups.
I'm totally with you on that. Now, all this talk about blood pressure changes is making me think about those who already have hypertension. Are long flights even an option for them?
That's an important question. If you already have high blood pressure, talking to your doctor before a long flight isn't just a good idea, it's essential.
So it's not necessarily a no-fly zone, but it's about understanding the risks and taking the right precautions.
Precisely. Your doctor can help you assess your individual risk factors and give you personalized advice on how to manage your blood pressure throughout the trip.
This is starting to sound like long flights require more prep than just packing your suitcase. But in all seriousness, this is great information to have. Now, I know our listeners are probably wondering, okay, so what can I actually do to make my next flight a little healthier?
Yeah.
Let's get practical. What are your top recommendations?
All right, let's break it down into some easy-to-remember tips. First and foremost, channel your inner camel and stay hydrated.
Okay, got it. Water bottle check. What else?
Resist the siren song of those salty snacks and alcoholic beverages. I know, it's tough.
Yeah.
But they'll only dehydrate you further and potentially send your blood pressure soaring. Think of it as a detox for your cardiovascular system.
Fruits, veggies, maybe some unsalted nuts. It's like a mini health retreat at 30,000 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's be real. Staying in your seat for 10 hours straight is not exactly conducive to good circulation.
You're telling me. That's why moving around the cabin is so crucial. Aim to get up and walk around at least every couple of hours. And even if you can't leave your seat, simple stretches or ankle rolls can make a difference.
So we've got hydration, we've got movement. What else should we keep in mind?
Comfort is key.
Right.
Wear loose, comfy clothes that won't restrict your blood flow. Think yoga pants, not skinny jeans.
Okay.
And if you're really concerned about your blood pressure, you can even bring a monitor with you.
Uh-huh.
Just double check the airline's restrictions on batteries beforehand.
I love that. It's like taking control of your health, even when you're
Yeah.
literally up in the air. Speaking of feeling in control, any tips for those of us who get a little anxious about flying? Because stress can definitely impact blood pressure, right?
You're spot on. Deep breathing exercises, meditation, listening to calming music, anything that helps you relax can work wonders. Consider it your in-flight spa treatment.
I'm already feeling more zen just thinking about it. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but let's shift gears for a moment and talk about what happens if someone does have a medical emergency on a flight. I know flight attendants have some basic first aid training, but what about more serious situations?
That's a great point to bring up. While flight attendants are amazing at handling a lot of things, they're not equipped for complex medical care.
Right.
In those cases, there are options like a medical escort or even an air ambulance.
Now, those sound serious. Could you break down the difference between those services? I think a lot of people might not be familiar with them.
Sure. A medical escort is a trained medical professional who travels with you on a commercial flight.
Okay.
They can monitor your condition, administer medications, and basically provide that extra layer of support. It's like having your own personal in-flight medic.
That sounds incredibly reassuring, especially if you have a pre-existing condition.
Mm-hmm.
But what about air ambulances? When would those come into play?
Those are reserved for more critical situations. Essentially, it's a flying intensive care unit.
Oh, wow.
Think advanced medical equipment and a whole team of professionals. It's for when someone is too sick or unstable to fly commercially.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like a whole hospital in the sky.
Knowing about these options definitely adds another level of peace of mind to traveling, especially for those with health concerns.
Exactly. And remember, it never hurts to do your research beforehand and understand what resources are available to you. Just having that knowledge can make a big difference. Welcome back, everyone. For those just joining us, I'm Olivia Harper, and I'm here with Samuel Harrison to guide you through this fascinating world of blood pressure and how it's affected by those long-haul flights so many of us take.
It's great to be back. Before we took off, we were talking about how important it is to talk to your doctor before a long flight if you already have hypertension.
Oh.
What kind of advice can a healthcare provider offer in those situations?
You know, it's interesting. Managing hypertension is really about creating like a personalized approach.
Your doctor understands your medical history, the medications you're taking, and your overall, health picture.
Right.
So when it comes to flying, they can give you advice that's tailored to you.
I imagine they could include things like adjusting medications or recommending specific strategies for the flight, right?
Exactly. They might adjust the dosage or timing of your blood pressure medications
Okay.
to make sure they're effective during the entire flight. Or they might suggest ways to manage stress and anxiety, which we know can make blood pressure spike.
That makes total sense. Stress management is so important, especially when you're in a situation like flying where you don't have as much control over your environment.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just meds and stress management.
Right.
Your doctor can also help you figure out any potential risks that might be unique to your situation.
Okay.
Like they might advise you on certain foods or drinks to avoid because they could interact with your meds or make your hypertension worse.
Wow, that's incredibly valuable. Having that personalized guidance from your doctor can really empower you to make informed decisions about your health when you travel.
It really does. It's all about understanding the potential challenges and being prepared to address them. And speaking of being prepared, let's talk about some practical tips for healthier flying that everyone can benefit from, whether they have pre-existing hypertension or not.
Bring on the tips. We've already touched on the importance of hydration, haven't we?
We have, and I can't stress it enough, drinking enough water during your flight is crucial.
Yeah.
It helps maintain healthy blood pressure and just overall well-being. That dry cabin air can zap the moisture right out of you, so make sure you have water handy and sip on it consistently.
It's amazing how such a simple thing can make a big difference. But sometimes those sugary sodas or juices are calling your name. What other drinks should we try to avoid on flights?
Alcohol is a big one, or at least try to limit it as much as possible.
Sure.
It's a diuretic, which means it makes you pee more, and that dehydrates you further.
Oh, okay.
Remember how we talked about dehydration thickening your blood and making your heart work harder? Well, alcohol adds to that. Plus, it can interact with certain medications, so it's always best to play it safe.
Good point. While we're on the topic of things to avoid, what about food? Are there any dietary recommendations for maintaining healthy blood pressure when you're up in the air?
Definitely. Those salty snacks they offer can be tempting, but they're loaded with sodium, which can contribute to high blood pressure. Pack your own healthy snacks like fruits, veggies, or some unsalted
It's
nuts.
like a mini picnic in your seat. Plus, those options are not only healthier, but they'll also keep you feeling fuller and more energized throughout the flight. Now, we've talked about what to drink and eat, but what about physical activities or anything specific we can do while we're stuck in those seats?
There are actually some really simple exercises and stretches you can do right in your seat. Ankle circles, calf raises, even just flexing and pointing your toes can help improve circulation in your legs and reduce that risk of blood clots. And of course, if you can get up and walk around the cabin every couple of hours, that's even better.
It's like giving your legs a mini workout. And while we're thinking about physical comfort, does what we wear on a flight actually impact our blood pressure?
Believe it or not, it can. Tight clothing, especially around your legs, can restrict blood flow and make you swell up. Opt for loose, comfortable clothing that won't interfere with your circulation.
Right.
And you know, compression socks can be a lifesaver if you're prone to leg swelling.
Compression socks are a game changer for long flights.
Mm.
I agree. They really make a difference in how your legs feel when you finally land. Speaking of feeling better, what about blood pressure monitors? Should people with hypertension consider bringing one on the flight?
It's certainly an option.
Okay.
If you're worried about your blood pressure going up and down during the flight, having a monitor can give you some peace of mind.
Right.
Just be sure to check the airline's rules about batteries for medical devices.
Right. It's always good to be prepared and know the regulations. Another thing that comes to mind,
Yeah.
medications. What's the best way to manage medications, especially if you're taking them regularly for hypertension?
This is important. Always pack all your medications in your carry-on luggage, never in your checked bags. That way you have them with you throughout the flight.
Right.
And keep them in their original labeled containers to avoid any issues with security.
That's such good advice. You don't want to be stuck without your essential meds, especially on a long flight.
Hmm.
And speaking of being stuck, what about those unexpected delays or situations where you might need to adjust your medication schedule because of time zone changes? Any tips on that?
Definitely have a conversation with your doctor beforehand about how to handle those kinds of situations.
Mm.
They can advise you on whether it's safe to adjust your medication timing or dosage if you need to. It's always better to have a plan in place rather than trying to figure it out on the fly. No pun intended.
I love it. Planning ahead is key. Now let's talk about managing stress and anxiety during flights. We've mentioned it a bit, but are there any specific techniques you'd recommend?
Deep breathing exercises are fantastic for calming those pre-flight jitters or dealing with in-flight anxiety.
Yeah.
There are tons of guided meditation apps out there that can help you focus on your breath and relax your body. And of course, listening to calming music or even reading a book can be great distractions from any stress you might be feeling.
It's all about finding those little things that help you create a sense of calm amidst the chaos of travel. You know, it strikes me that a lot of these tips for managing blood pressure during flights are actually just really good advice for staying healthy in general, even when you're not traveling.
You're absolutely right. Staying hydrated, eating healthy foods, getting regular exercise, and managing stress, these are all essential for a healthy lifestyle, whether you're on a plane or not.
So those long flights can actually be a good reminder to practice those healthy habits and maybe even establish some new ones.
Mm.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier: medical emergencies on flights.
Yes, it's an important topic. While we've covered a lot of ground on how to prevent blood pressure issues during flights, it's important to acknowledge that emergencies can happen.
Exactly. So what can people do to be prepared in case of a medical emergency on a flight? Is it enough to rely on the flight attendants, or are there other things to consider?
Flight attendants are fantastic and receive basic first aid and CPR training,
Uh-huh.
but they're not equipped to handle more complex medical situations. If you have a pre-existing health condition, like hypertension, it's worth thinking about additional options, like traveling with a medical escort, or even considering an air ambulance for more serious cases.
Those sound like really valuable resources, especially for people with health concerns that might require specialized care during travel. Could you tell us a little more about the difference between a medical escort and an air ambulance?
Of course, a medical escort is a trained medical professional who actually travels with you on a regular commercial flight. They can monitor your condition, administer medications if needed, and provide basic medical care throughout the journey.
Okay.
It's a fantastic option for people who need some level of medical support but aren't critically ill. It's basically like having a personal medic right there with you, making sure you're okay throughout the flight.
That sounds incredibly reassuring. What about air ambulances? When are those typically used?
Air ambulances are a whole other level of care. They're essentially flying intensive care units equipped with advanced medical technology and a whole team of medical
Right,
professionals.
wow.
They're usually reserved for patients who are too sick or unstable to travel on a regular flight.
Wow, that's amazing. It's incredible to think about the level of medical care that's available even at 30,000 feet.
It really is. And while these services might not be necessary for everyone, it's good to know they exist. It's all about having that peace of mind and knowing there are options if you need them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Olivia, we've covered so much ground in this part of our deep dive. From those personalized tips from your doctor to all those practical things you can do on the flight itself, it's amazing how much control we actually have over our health, even when we're miles above the ground.
It's empowering, isn't it?
It is.
Knowledge is power, and I hope our listeners are feeling ready to take on their next long-haul flight with confidence and a plan.
And we are back for the final descent of our deep dive into blood pressure and long-haul flights right here on the EMT Spots Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
And we've been soaring through some pretty fascinating information, haven't we?
We have. It's been quite a trip.
It really has. We've explored how things like altitude and immobility and even that, sneaky dehydration can impact our blood pressure up in the air. We talked about, those risks of blood clots and how important it is to have that conversation with your doctor if you have hypertension. And of
Yeah.
course, we've armed our listeners with a whole toolbox full of practical tips to stay healthy on those, sometimes dreaded long flights.
Oh, yeah. Those tips are so important. From staying hydrated and choosing healthy snacks to getting up and moving around the cabin and even, mastering those stress-bustive techniques, we really have covered a lot of ground. And we even took a little detour into the world of medical escorts and air ambulances. I bet that was new information for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how much there is to think about when it comes to our health and well-being while traveling. But you know what I find really empowering? It's that by understanding these factors and taking those proactive steps, we can actually make those travel experiences so much safer and so much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And I really do hope our listeners are feeling empowered to make informed decisions about their health, especially when it comes to traveling.
Well said, Olivia. Well, as we come in for a landing on this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question, something to ponder as they plan their next big adventure. So here it is. What steps will you take to make your next long flight healthier? Think about it. It could be as simple as packing that reusable water bottle and some healthy snacks. Or maybe it's committing to getting up and moving around the cabin every hour. Or maybe it's finally, trying out those deep breathing exercises or downloading that meditation app you've been thinking about.
Whatever it is, Samuel, I hope our listeners take away the message that you know their health matters and that even small changes can make a big difference when it comes to managing their blood pressure and well-being during travel.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Olivia, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. I know our listeners have learned a lot from you.
It's been my pleasure, Samuel. I always enjoy diving into these topics and helping people understand the complexities of blood pressure and how they can take control of their health.
And to our fantastic listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into blood pressure and long-haul flights. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Remember, this is just the beginning of your journey toward healthier travel. Keep exploring these topics, talk to your healthcare providers, and take those steps to prioritize your well-being.
You got it. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe to the EMT Spots Blood Pressure Podcast for more fascinating explorations into the world of blood pressure and heart health. We'd also love it if you'd like, comment, and share this episode with your friends and family. Every little bit helps spread the word about how important it is to be aware of and manage blood pressure.
Until next time, stay healthy, stay informed, and safe travels, everyone.
This has been Samuel Harrison,
And Olivia Harper.
signing off from the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast.